how you determine your target market. So this is actually a really important piece is within marketing and sales, a lot of the time people think of target market as strictly a marketing term. It's actually not a sales term. And it really is. And it's very important from a sales perspective to think about what your target market looks like. Typically, marketing people are trying to develop as many leads as possible for the company and reach as many customers as possible. So it's a little bit more loosely defined within the marketing department than it is within the sales department. As a salesperson, when you're actually going and speaking with a customer, you need to have a very clear definition of if this person is even worth my time, if this company is worth my time. Person specifically in the stance of, is it the right title? Do they have the right responsibilities? Are they the person who can drive action within the organization? Are they someone people are going to listen to? And do they actually really know what's going on within the organization? And then the organization themselves, you're looking at, do they fit my initial Lean Startup methodology definition of they have titled right titles within the organization, and they also are in the right industry, potentially customer size, or work with one of my channel partners. But there's also elements around how big their specific departments are, what their tech stack looks like, how sophisticated they are. All of these pieces actually play a really important piece in defining what your target market is going to look like and how you actually approach that market. If we look at the definition of target market and how we're approaching it, there's an element in defining your target market that it can be a broad definition if you're in a transactional sell, and how specific you get it becomes more and more important on how high touch that sales process is going to be. So for example, for an enterprise level sale, because you're looking at a one-to-one relationship and a one-to-one sale, it's a much more complex sale, and it's going to take a lot more time. So if you're spending a lot of time on an opportunity, you want to make sure from the very beginning that you understand that this is actually going to be a good fit. Where if you're looking at a transactional sell, you can have a bit looser defined definition of what your target market is going to look like, because you're trying to reach a much broader market because you're at a lower price point and a lower time period to sell. I find a lot of people early on in their sales career, so assuming a founder hasn't sold before, when they're giving a demo, or even when you're giving pitches to VCs, we're looking at the pitch to be the sales process, and it's actually not. The pitch is confirmation of the conversation you've already had. You understanding specifically in the qualification process, when you're sitting down with your customer, the key pain points, 3 key pain points is great. You don't need to have 50. If you understand 3 key pain points of that customer and making sure that you show how you solve, and you've already talked about in the qualification process, told them the story and giving them customer examples of how those pain points have been solved, and then going through and validating everything that you said around those pain points being solved. And then a lot of the demo ends up actually having a conversation around how it's going to be implemented. So it's very interesting to actually look at and how and confirming that the value that you're presenting is actually equivalent to the cost that you're going to be charging that customer, and navigating those pieces and creating more value in that. Lifetime value of a customer is the monetary amount in which you can charge your customer, multiplied by the time period in which they'll stay with you, and then you take that amount and multiply it by the retention rate for that customer. And then if we look at what the cost to acquire a customer, it is to sell and market to that customer. You want to develop and devise a strategy when you're building out your company where the value of the customer is going to be substantially greater than the value that's going to be the cost it's going to be to market and sell to that customer. And there's various ways you can go about doing this. It just depends on your go-to-market strategy. But when you look at this specifically, it's really important to factor this into how you're building your costs of your business. If it's going to cost a lot to get to your market, you're going to need to build that into your runway. It may be where you have a hurdle that you have to get over. You know, you're pushing a boulder up a hill when you're building out a startup, and that's a really important piece to understand. And so there are costs up front to reach your market, but the receptiveness of your market to the strategy in which you're selling and marketing to them is a really important piece to understand. And it's also test, and keep testing. You may think you have a way to reach that market, but in reality, there may be a better way. And unless you're testing those methodologies, you're not going to know. The overall lifetime value of that customer if you're selling a $20 product, doing a direct sell doesn't make sense. If you're selling an enterprise solution, a direct sell makes a lot of sense. So you need to look at how it's going to be to reach that market. And long term, if it's going to require a direct sell to reach your market, and it's a $20 product, it's not going to work. And so you need to figure out, is it your product that you're building that just doesn't satisfy the need of the market, where you can charge the cost for a direct sell, or is it that the way in which you're going about reaching that market just isn't effective, and maybe we need to try something new. So most of the time when you are starting to build out your market, you're going to be doing direct sales a lot of the time, because it's part of that product development process. So knowing whether your approach is actually going to work is actually looking at what that sales process looks like. So if you're touching your customer 1, 2, 3, 4 times and it's their $50 value, like, that's not going to work. But if you're touching your customer 1 or 2 times and it's a low cost product, that'll work. If you're selling into the enterprise space and you're getting in front of a large group of a board, and your product is a couple $1,000s, even if it's a $25,000 a year product, you're going to need to look at long term if that's actually going to make sense for your business if you scale out to 100, 200, 300, 1,000 customers. And you're not just looking at the short-term perspective of making the first sale. You need to be looking at the long-term perspective of, how am I going to reach this market long-term? Because direct selling isn't going to be viable long-term unless you're in the enterprise space. Gradually, when you look at how you're scaling out your business overall, you're looking at, initially a direct sell, high-cost sell. It's how it works a lot of the times. You can do speaking events and things like that to get your product out there. You can do a lot of channel relationships as well, which are incredibly effective to get your product out there. So selling through like an Intuit marketplace or a Salesforce marketplace or a Marketo marketplace, or getting your products out or your code out on GitHub so people can find your market or can find out about your product are great ways to get it out there in a low cost way. However, if you're having to touch every single customer in order to communicate your message, and you're a low price point, it's going to be a big problem. Now, if we're looking at a higher price point, there's a lot more flexibility in that. And when you're going to market, you're going to be looking at, where are my direct relationships? And are they the best customer for my business long term? Because your initial customer base is going to be who you're building the rest of your market around, because your product's really going to go into the direction of satisfying those customers too.